Good morning, everybody on the West Coast, and good afternoon over there on the East Coast. Today I have Brendan here with Sunset HQ, and today we're going to be talking about how to close your startup properly. So without further ado, it's a tough subject, but Brendan's got a lot of experience here working with a lot of great startups that might have had, their moments, but, there definitely comes a time where some startups have to know when and how to close up shop. So very much looking forward to learning about your company and what you guys do. I would love if you could start with an elevator pitch.
Yeah, no, really appreciate the time. Excited to be here. And quick elevator pitch. We help venture-backed tech startups wind down, primarily pre-seed through Series A startups. That's pretty much it. I mean, we handle kind of all the complexity, so both legal, tax, and other operational aspects. But really, our whole goal is, you as a founder, I've been through it. It's a really tough time. You maybe don't know what is next for you. And so our whole mission is really help founders find what's next, right? Give them that time back to find the next job or start the next company and not have to worry so much about, months longs of crazy complexity that is not very fun.
Yeah, definitely. Everybody likes the idea of starting things and, the idea of success, but there definitely comes a time if you're willing to, make a career out of being an entrepreneur, you got to get used to the failure aspect as well. Absolutely
big time. Yeah, I mean, the statistics definitely show that, and not even just under venture and tech. The kind of failure rates are even higher there, but just every single business, kind of SMBs across the board. Yeah, it's like 75% chance that business probably won't be around in 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, but there's one thing I got to say. It's like, if you make a career out of it, you'll get better over time. So your success rate definitely, it should be going up if you learn lessons, of course. But unlike athletes where your body degrades over time and you kind of have a short window for that, business is something you can do your whole life and continue to grow on it.
Absolutely. No, I love that. Totally agree. It's like golf or tennis, I guess, or any one of those. But
yep.
Yeah, completely agree.
So how did you decide to start this company? Did you just have a bunch of successes in a row or did you have a kind of a bout with failure at one point where you said, you know what, this process is terrible. I wish I could help other people through it so they don't have to go through what I did.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, went through Y Combinator a few years ago, ended up selling my first company out of there. And then, pretty much immediately started another thing. Definitely should have waited. That was not a great move. And, did the classic mistakes, just like built in isolation for a really long time, didn't actually put it on the market, didn't just, thought we had this problem. So maybe other people did. So after about a year of just kind of like stealth mode or whatnot, we went out, no one cared. And by that time I was like, I'm tired. Like I don't even know, 6 years in kind of straight. I was like, we got to just wind this thing down. And, although we had a decent exit on the first one, it was just the second one really took me down a couple notches. I really didn't know if I was meant to be an entrepreneur. I really didn't know what I wanted to do next. It was also kind of like during the peak of COVID, and so I'm trying to figure all that out. And all probably founders listen to this. It's so easy to start something, right? You just go on a Stripe Atlas. It takes like 5 minutes. I think it's $500. Very simple.
Not the business card's on the way.
Yeah, and you're good to go. Little did I know, I was like, hit up my lawyers, like, cool, this will be 5 minutes, no problem. Like 9 months later, I'm still working this thing. I like screwed something up in New York. And I was like, this is the worst process I've ever been through. Blacked it out. Was like, cool, great, that's over. Never think about that again. Got different jobs, worked for other founders. And then over kind of the next, call it 18, 24 months, just had a lot of founders start hitting me up. Just like buddies of mine, YC buddies, things like that. Just be like, what's up? Things aren't going that well. I know you've been through it. I know you've been through both a sale, but also a wind down. Like, can you just help me out? And I was like, please don't ask me. I screwed mine up, but sure, we'll chat through it. And after several of those conversations, I just thought it was crazy that it was just so easy to start things. But like we discussed, most companies don't end up working out, for better or for worse. And there was just no resources and there was no one helping out there. So that was my kind of very long-winded, but that's the story and kind of origin story behind Sunset itself and kind of why we started this.
Very nice. Yeah, I've been there before too, and I got to tell you, it's you know, in those moments, you kind of wish there was somebody there to kind of coach you through it, both from like the liability standpoint, financial standpoint, and just reputation as well, right? So nobody likes to close shop and say they failed, but it's just all part of the process of doing business.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting when you go back and look at so many of these successful founders. You might hear about a podcast briefly. They'll be like, "Oh yeah, no, yeah, did this thing for a year or two, didn't work out, and then boom, created whatever."
Yep.
But I'd really just focus on those when they say that, right? It's most successful founders have had a lot of pretty brutal failures,
Yep.
whether big or small, or private or public. And you're totally right. It is just a part of this. And I think if you're willing to kind of, we are talking about this before the pod, but if you're just kind of obsessed and can't stop doing it, you're just going to keep doing it. And like you said, eventually you're going to get some base hits or some home runs out of that. But it's just kind of the game.
Yeah, the person that loves the journey will always go further than the person that likes the destination. So one thing I've seen with a lot of founders too, if they get into it, I'm like, oh, what's your motivation for starting this thing? If they say, oh, it's to make a bunch of money, right away, that's usually a red flag. It's this guy's not in it for the right reasons. But if the people that really identify a customer problem and are close to that problem, many times I've seen like agencies, for instance, maybe they have a lot of clients that they're doing a lot of marketing work for, and then they build this internal tool to help whatever they're doing with their clients. Being that close to the problem and solution, those products tend to work out a lot better. So the founders that come into it really identifying a clear problem that they understand and really actually want to do something about it tend to go a lot further with creating something that's actually worthwhile.
Absolutely. And kind of going back, for any founder who is in it for the money, just go to Wall Street.
Yeah.
It's so much better. Like if I was in it for the money, that would have been a great career choice. This is not a good career choice for that. Because again, likelihood that you are going to kind of make it big on your own is far less than either, go to Wall Street or just join a really high growth, earlier stage startup, get your stock options vest. Like you can do fantastic, you can do really, really well. So that's definitely probably a better, safer path than this journey. Most of the founders we talk to, right, they're just not, you don't pay yourself for years. Or you pay yourself very little for years. And again, the success rate is incredibly small for it to work out and have some type of financial outcome for yourself. And again, not to go on a tangent, but even when you see the big headlines, right, of folks getting acquired for X amount or whatnot, behind the scenes, the cap table, all the liquidation preferences, those founders could still end up with nothing or very, very little. So I would,
and if you track if you track most big successes too, like you said, a lot of times if you go to their backstory, you'll see, that they came from like, maybe multiple failures, and you might catch like a note or like a podcast interview they did a couple years ago where they have some like, in some cases a terrible idea and they're like, hey, it's his first startup, then everybody's like, hey, wow, this guy's an entrepreneur genius, like 10 years later. Well, the guy kind of learned as he went, and got better at it eventually to where you see him today when he's in the spotlight, right?
Totally. Absolutely.
You see that for any profession too. I mean, you look at actors as well too, right? If you go back in time to like the 80s, you'll see in movies like Harrison Ford or whatever, it's like a kind of like a supporting character in the background somewhere, right? And then where those kind of people end up eventually.
100%. Yep. Absolutely.
Now that's a tangent, but so I guess what are the clear signs for when a startup should wind down? Because a lot of times people, they push something for too long and they just when they should have just realized what the signs were and shut down right away so they can move on to the next new opportunity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really tough. It's tough to give an answer there, but I think from what I've both experienced and what I've seen, one is pretty simple, right? If you're out of cash, there's very little you can do. So that's pretty easy, right? And if you're really burning low, be careful. We can talk a little bit more about that later, but startups are not really something you should try and run to zero, especially not below zero. And a lot of folks do and don't really understand the ramifications of that. But ironically, it becomes a lot more expensive, a lot more time consuming, a lot more painful if that does actually occur. But I think really like some of the indicators I think of when it might be a good time to is really when you yourself, you the founder, are out of ideas, out of motivation, out of inspiration. We work with the average amount for startups that work with Sunset, we're returning on average $605,000.
Nice.
So a lot of those go through asset sales, acqui-hires, so they are returning capital. But a lot of folks, it doesn't matter. You might have a ton of the bank, but like if you're not into it, you are the company. And so if you're fully out yourself, then the company's out. And so it doesn't necessarily matter cash on hand or anything like that. It's really about your mental state.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a tough situation to go through too. If you're not really excited to be in there, everything kind of trickles down from the top. So, I mean, even if you have a great team, you also have to look out for what's in their best interest too, right? If you're not in it to win it, or you don't see a clear path within a reasonable time, you also have to consider these people and what kind of opportunities that they might be missing out on if they can go to something else.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think a big thing, it's when you're, for my kind of first starters, right? You don't, like you're saying, you don't really understand the opportunity cost of time, especially when you're starting something much younger, and kind of understand, okay, if I spend 5 years just kind of grinding out on this thing and we're not seeing, like, the market size doesn't seem that big, sales have been a slog. We feel like we're pushing this rock up the hill, but let's just keep on going. It's just, sometimes just everyone will be fine. Everyone will probably be better off if you just say, you know what, this isn't it. Either let's pivot, try something new out, maybe return the capital, kind of reassess, versus just really try and go cockroach mode forever. But it depends. There's so many great outlier stories of folks who do go cockroach mode and pull it out, but they're great stories because they are outliers.
That's a good point. Mostly it doesn't happen that way. I had a startup I did with a bunch of friends actually many years ago, but thankfully we were able to wrap this one up pretty quickly. We had some fun with it. I made a little bit of money, not that much, but basically we bought ourselves beers, with the boys, I guess. But we became good friends from the whole thing. We couldn't really quite figure out like good product market fit and figure out how to scale it, but everybody did their part, and we all kind of came together one day and we're like, hey, this thing's not going to go anywhere. But what we did win from it was some really good friendships, actually. So that was the big win, I think.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah, because it can definitely go the other way. More common. So that's huge. That's awesome to hear.
So how do you separate the emotional attachment? Like you mentioned, sometimes it is an emotional attachment that keeps people, or even ego, that keeps people sticking with something far past its expiration date. What would you say to founders to how to identify if they are emotionally attached to something and they need to start looking at it more objectively when reading the indicators that they need to close their business?
Oh man, that's such a tough question because I don't think you can in many ways, right? I think folks always talk about this of like, oh my God, my identity is wrapped up in my company and so on and so forth. And I just don't think I personally, maybe other folks are much better, but I just don't think there's a way around that. And I don't necessarily know if there should be. This thing is something that I think about most of my day, every day. And so it's hard not to have it be so attached to me as an individual. And so, but in terms of being a little more objective, I do think a lot of it comes with just experience and time. I'm kind of, going through this myself, right? When you're younger and it's kind of first time, you maybe kind of switching gears a little. I think something that I learned with this one is, when folks kind of describe product market fit and they're like, it's a feeling, and you're like, that's really unhelpful. What the hell does that mean? And I think that unfortunately is the truth, that it's hard to explain. But I think when you don't experience growth, and you haven't necessarily experienced at other companies or really other early stage companies, it's very, very hard to get that objective, like you're saying, kind of have that separation and be able to step back and really be like, what's going on here? Yeah. Once you've kind of experienced that, though, you will see those indicators earlier, and hopefully can then really take a step back and assess, like, is this actually the right thing? But I think without that, it's really, really tough because you just don't know any better, right? You're just like, you hear the stories of, again, all the outliers, like we just slogged and kept going. And then eventually one day it worked out. So you're like, okay, great. I'm on that journey. Mine follows totally that. But yeah, I think once you anyways.
Yeah, I think totally agree. I think understanding product market fit is really key, and whether you do it yourself or experience that with a different company or startup, understanding, anecdotally too, not just through the data, like when that moment happens and why it happens, you get that gut instinct, I guess, like we have product market fit, and the data will, back that up too. But knowing that moment when you actually have a product that's people will actually want to use, pay for, and could potentially scale. I think everybody should try to experience that at least once, whether it's their own company or another. It gives a good perspective on how to build something properly. But I think there's a lot of moments leading up to that moment too, whether you hit product market fit or not. Maybe getting feedback from people, like, do people just not give a crap about what you're pitching? Maybe the pitch is bad, right? Try a couple different approaches there and just really A/B test everything. Like, is there no market for this? Is the solution not really valued by people? Maybe I'm pitching it the wrong way. Maybe I'm packaging my offering in the wrong way too, right? Maybe I'm not producing the most simplistic, frictionless product experience that solves that key problem that people have, and I'm just throwing a bunch of extra features in there because I like to build.
Yep. No, I totally agree. I mean, I think a big thing that actually one of the most helpful things I feel like I learned from YC itself was kind of the one-liner. Some of my previous companies, it was hard to explain in one line, like what the hell it is, and no one could even understand it. And yeah, that, I don't know, what you were saying just made me think of that of, with Sunset, I just wanted to be incredibly clear exactly, who it was for and what it does in literally one sentence that like my mom could understand. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough when you haven't seen the other side.
Simplicity is the hardest thing, ironically. Being able to distill an idea or a product down to the most basic version, and even that pitch for that matter. Like, I totally agree. That's the first place you could start. If you're creating a solution that you can't really explain that easily and really convey that to people, then it's probably, you're probably off to the wrong start already.
Yeah, totally. And again, there are plenty of solutions that I could try and explain to my mother and she wouldn't understand, but to the right ICP, sure, they completely understand it in one sentence. So there is that caveat, but yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, I think again, we were talking about this beforehand, but the default is always to try and add and just add and add and add. I'm going to do this and this and this. And I suffer this all the time, even with Sunset, right? Maybe we should do this and do that and add this and add that. And it just, oh man, it's really hard to say no when things feel like good ideas or there's money there. But yeah, the simpler you can make it, the faster you're gonna probably grow.
Yeah, that's why the key idea of like MVP is so important, because it focuses you to, and it's probably actually better from like a bootstrap standpoint. You invest less money, time to get like the most basic version of the product. And if you can get that to get product market fit, then you have something that's easier to build on top of. Where I totally agree with you. A lot of times you just think like, well, what if we just add this one more feature, and then maybe this feature, like, oh, customer XYZ over here. One guy said if we had this feature, he would sign up for our platform. But maybe to that one particular customer, that's important feature for him. But does it tie back to the overall product and the ICP that you're going after, and create an elegant solution that actually helps the broad base of people that you're actually targeting?
Yep, absolutely. No, I completely agree.
Yeah, I've seen so many products just become monsters over time. You're like, oh man, go back to the drawing board. Or even at that point, you realize like either you strip out a bunch of stuff and streamline this, or you just gotta, that might be the signal to shut down as well.
Yeah.
So I guess what mistakes do founders often make by waiting too long to make this decision? Like, what are the potential negative outcomes that can happen from waiting too long to shut down?
I mean, I think a big one is the optionality. So let's say you have built something, and that could be the team. That could be the team and the IP and assets of the business. But when you run it so low, you don't have the optionality to go see, can I get acqui-hired, right? Can I find a new home for myself, for my team? Can we go through that process? Can we understand the potential buyers? Again, if you've got interesting assets, they're making they're actually generating some revenue, but the burn's too high. Again, you lose that optionality, right? All these things take a long time. That's the problem. M&A And acquihires take a lot of time, and you're going to burn runway while you're trying to do them. And I will tell you, like the soft landings, whether to you internally and at the time don't necessarily feel like, again, it's like so far from that, probably the outcome you're looking for, but kind of the long-term impacts of them, I think, are much greater than folks really realize, right? You've really kind of saved something. You've shown and gotten respect from probably your investors, from your employees. And again, you've actually, you can say you got acquired. You can say you went through a sale, and that does mean a lot if you go out, try and get another job later on, or try and start another company and raise our money. All these things are really important. So I think, to me, the biggest thing is that optionality. Outside of that, like we kind of mentioned, you run it too close. Wind downs cost a lot of money. They just do. They're not cheap. They're not like incorporating a startup, and they take a lot of time. And so that is super important to think about. We can get a little bit into other potential concerns or liabilities when you run too low, but there are also, obviously, if you go really, really low, there are potentials for personal liabilities for you as the founder and that fiduciary and board member. So there's a lot of things, but again, higher level optionality, I think, is the biggest one that I see founders miss out on.
Yeah, and get started sooner than later too, because nobody likes to be in a position where they're really desperate and you're literally running out of money next month. Like investors don't want to invest in that company. And people that might want to buy it, once you get into due diligence, they're going to say, oh, maybe we'll just wait a month or two and we'll just get this stuff for pennies on the dollars,
Absolutely. No, completely agree. So I think really my advice there, right, is you're 6 to 9 months cash out.
Yep.
You've got kind of a few different options, right? One is potentially, okay, something's not working out, maybe we need to pivot. And part of that, you might need to do layoffs or something along those lines to really conserve the capital left. Another is you try and go out and raise, maybe it's a bridge round from existing or a net new round. But again, if you don't have the growth rates, you've only got a certain amount of time. So be super careful with how you spend it. And like I was saying, the others are kind of going out, trying to do more of an asset sale or an acquihire style, acquisition play. And that's usually our suggestion. Another great thing to do is talk to lawyers, us, another provider around wind down. So you at least get an understanding of how much is it going to cost, how much time is it going to take, what is going to be involved here. So you're not, scrambling like you were saying with 2 weeks left and unpaid wages and crazy stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. You just got to do what's in the best thing for all the stakeholders too, especially investors and employees as well. So I guess, how do you identify when it's a good time to actually go seek acquisition or maybe a merger with somebody? And where would you start actually? For a lot of people, they don't even know where to start. Like they don't know the idea of corporate development people.
That's a really good question. Again, like I was saying, probably when to start. If the signs are there that it's probably going to be difficult to raise and you're kind of in that 6-9 months cash out, I don't think it's a bad time to talk to your board or have a real conversation with yourself if you're the only board member around what should we be doing. And to maybe give a quick sense, right? Mergers are probably highly unlikely for the types of companies we're talking about, right? Mergers are usually similar size companies effectively like coming together into a new entity. Probably pretty unlikely. The most likely thing is going to be an asset sale. So there's a stock sale, right? So sometimes you hear of acquisitions, it's usually a stock sale. So the buyer is literally purchasing all of your stock in exchange for potentially cash and or preferred equity in the buyer's company. In more of a distressed situation, it's a little bit unlikely because you can imagine if the buyer is purchasing the full entity, they're getting everything, right? They're getting the liabilities, they're getting all the nasty stuff. So what I would say, just to start, an asset sale is probably going to be what it looks like, which is really the buyer's purchasing specific assets. So like, I just want the code base. I just want this, brand, things along those lines. And again, potentially some employees along with that. So it can be like an asset sale, acquihire combination potentially. And kind of how you get started is, one really helpful avenue is your investors. They have a ton of portfolios. portfolio companies. They know a lot of people. So that's not a bad place to start. There are some investment bankers who will work on small cap deals, depending on kind of your revenue. Or it really is the relationships that you've built, right? What are some competitors, some folks in adjacent spaces that, you've talked to, maybe build relationships with over the time, or other founders, who are looking for great engineers that you have, and start those conversations, and just kind of see, don't say, hey, things aren't going well, we're trying to like fire sale, but just be like, hey, want to talk about how things are going, strategic partnerships, things like that, kind of see where the conversation takes you. But yeah, that's a little bit there.
Yeah, two key things from that too. Always keep a good relationship with your investors, communicate with them, even when you have to communicate bad news or tough times, because a lot of them, if you are transparent and you mean well, they will want to help, and that could involve them maybe even doubling up and putting in more money to keep the company going, or maybe them opening up their network and trying to help you out. The other part too, as I say, competitors. A lot of people want to, don't want to play nice with their competitors, but I'm a big fan of, actually treating your competitors with respect. And if you build a relationship with them, obviously you're not giving away your trade secrets, but you build those relationships. You never know where they come in handy. Maybe you're acquiring them later. Maybe they're acquiring you. But if you have a good relationship with your competitors, that channel's always open.
Absolutely. And yeah, just going back to the investor front, I think your advice there is so apt, right? For wind downs or for anything. Especially if you have like a few kind of investors who are confidants or folks you really trust and who've helped you out, definitely try and either build those relationships or nurture those relationships, because they also have a vested interest, right? Yeah. For them to even get a 50 cents on the dollar versus 25 cents or 1x, right? Get back their investment through some asset sale. These have a pretty big impact, especially on emerging managers and newer funds. That is not inconsequential to them. So they do have an interest, some of them do, in actually helping you out and helping get that soft landing as well. So yeah, highly recommend thinking really long-term if you're early on right now and starting out, around, making sure that these relationships stay.
Yeah. And if you focus on keeping those relationships intact, a lot of people just, you never know when you need them later down the line. A lot of people really don't reach out to somebody unless they need something. That's a big no-go, red flag from any relationship, by the way, not just with investors, but it won't work in a relationship with a significant other. And it doesn't work, especially doesn't work with investors with money on the line.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I guess with that said, what are some of the most important legal steps that a founder can do to protect themselves from a legal standpoint? Maybe how can they go about prioritizing the interests of their employees, customers, and other stakeholders to make sure everybody gets what they want, but they're not legally exposed or anything?
I think the biggest thing, there's a lot of different things, but I'll focus just on the employees. I think that's probably where you should be thinking about the most. Unpaid wages specifically, and that includes things like PTO and unpaid vacation or anything along those lines. There are certain things that, again, this is not legal advice, anything like that, but there's certain activities that you as a board member can do that might pierce the corporate veil, right? So you have a corporate entity to protect you, but there's some things that you might do that could actually bypass that corporate entity and you become personally liable for. And unpaid wages is a really kind of classic common one. Yeah. And so it's really important to think about your zone of insolvency. Just walking through this real quick, let's say you've got 300 grand in the bank, you're burning 100K in a month, 100K a month. You're like, great, I've got 3 months of runway, but you actually haven't tallied up, right? Okay, if we laid off if we shut down today, we got to pay severance, maybe again, all the PTO. We might need to pay out all these different creditors, these different folks. What about our lease agreement? All of our customer contracts that haven't been paid. You tally all that up, you might already be insolvent. Yeah. You might actually owe today 400 grand and you have 300 in the bank. So it's really, really important to understand your financial situation. Because again, once you kind of cross that line, things can get pretty hairy. So that's one. And two is, again, with employees, if there are layoffs, terminations, things like that, work with counsel. Work with counsel throughout, but work with legal counsel to make sure there are state-by-state regulations. There are things called like the Warren Act. If you have, X amount of employees in certain states, you need to give them 60 days notice. So there's a lot of different things to be thinking about, but I would say there are a lot of things that aren't great and potential liabilities, but probably the most important is really focus on your employees. And again, focus on your fiduciary responsibility, and do what's best for all your shareholders and those folks.
Definitely. Yeah, looks like we hit time, but I could go a few minutes over if you can.
Yeah, no problem.
I told you this would be an interesting conversation. Yeah, because I've been through the ups and downs of startups as well. So always very interesting topic to talk about, the shutdown and failure aspect too, because honestly, that's where you kind of learn some of your best lessons and gets you to that point to where you can be successful with, that next startup that you might do.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
So are there any interesting statistics or trends that you've noticed from all the shutdowns that you've helped?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned one earlier, it's not all doom and gloom. Like I said, about 25, 30% of the clients that we work with are post-asset sale, post-acquihire, right? So even unfortunately, if you go through an asset sale or an acquihire, you still have the entity remaining, unlike a stock sale. So you still need to wind it down properly. But yeah, again, a lot of folks are prioritizing these soft landings and kind of giving themselves the space and time to do so. And that's really fantastic to see. Some other interesting stats are, again, from what we see, not surprisingly, it's just a lot of companies that wind down are in the seed stage. They, not surprisingly, haven't raised within, about 21, 22 months is the median there. They've all raised, somewhere between 4 million. We have some clients who've raised less. We have some clients who've raised, 50, 75 million plus. But really kind of the seed stage company is where we see most wind downs occurring, not surprisingly from the data. Just a higher volume, much risky. You've proven out some things, but it's always difficult there.
Yeah, some of the biggest mistakes a lot of early stage seed funded startups might get is, they go straight into growth mode where, maybe they have some initial customer traction, but, maybe they don't have like true product market fit and they start hiring a bunch of people, building features. And before you know it, you kind of get a little too far down one road, where you don't have the metrics maybe to get to Series A. So you have to be very methodical about it.
Totally. Yeah. And I think, I don't know if all y'all are looking at the data, but I can't remember if it was Andreessen or Sequoia, but growth rates are insane now. Everything has changed with AI, with funding, right? The old kind of triple, double, is no longer, right? You'll probably still get funded there, but the median, like the mid quartile right now is 0 to 2 million in, I think, 12 months. That's like your middle of the pack. So it's a different game out there. So yeah, I completely agree. Another quick thing, because we've talked about product market fit. One suggestion there for folks listening is Brian Balfour a few years ago created this kind of 4 quadrants where it really broke down not just product market fit, but he goes through product, market, channel, as well as model, and really getting those 4 kind of quadrants correct and how they all intertwine together. I just thought it was a much better, just a much more detailed walkthrough than just like when people say product market fit and you're kind of like, what does that mean? This is really helpful. So I'd highly recommend looking that up. I can't remember what it's called, like 4, I don't know, product market channel model fit, Brian Balfour.
Yeah, could you send me the link to that afterwards? I'll post it in
absolutely.
The YouTube video that we put up eventually, but also to the LinkedIn page. I'll just put it in the comments section there. Because I think that's a great idea, because a lot of people, like you said, don't know what product market fit is. They have like this idea in their head or maybe a feeling for what it could be. But if you can, quantify it a little bit more easily and have like a checklist of items, you could make it a lot easier for people to conceptualize it.
For sure. Absolutely.
Nice. So what's next for Sunset?
Yeah, I mean, again, our mission is really just help folks find what's next, right? And so, like I said, not everything's doom and gloom in this space, but it's still really tough, right? It may be, even if it's going well, it might not be right for you or the founder at that moment, or maybe you do want an exit or something along those lines. And all of these kind of exit related, paths are pretty difficult, pretty intense operationally, legally, and tax. And so we just want to help founders in more ways kind of as we continue to grow and scale. But for right now, again, when we talk about focus, we're just super focused on helping kind of our core clients and our core ICP just get through this tough time. So yeah.
Well, yeah, you guys have a really good product market fit, I'd say. But yeah, when I first met your guys' company, I was like, this is really interesting, because it's not the first kind of startup idea a lot of people would think of. A lot of people might say, oh, I want a social media app because that sounds kind of fun, but nobody needs that. What you guys do is a very much needed service that, I'm surprised more people don't do. It's very niche, but actually, I would say you have a huge market for it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I think, maybe, when I listen to podcasts, I always want kind of the nitty gritty. So I'll just, when I first started this, I think, one of my big lessons from the failure of the second one that we talked about is, I just knew I was like, I cannot build in isolation. I just need to figure out if there's anything here. And so I actually just wrote a blog post about kind of my journey. And at the very end, I was like, hey, if you're in a tough spot, if you need to wind down, here's my calendar link. Like, I'm happy to chat. And I think from that blog post, I got about 30 calls in like 2 weeks.
Wow.
And at the end, I just started selling people and I had nothing. And we refunded the money because I had no idea I wasn't ready to actually take on the clients. But that was how I started this, right? Is I really wanted to, I think what I see so many times is folks, right? You can spend so long doing all the modeling and trying to figure out all these different things. And, there's going to be a lot of people telling you that's a really dumb idea. I've had a lot of people tell me this is a really stupid and weird and bizarre idea. But, if you've experienced that pain yourself, and if you can just quickly validate the most important thing, which is, does anyone care and will anyone pay you?
Yeah.
Then it doesn't matter. And then you can just keep going on your journey. So anyways, that was just a little tidbit.
Yeah, it's once you realize you kind of struck a nerve, and you realize that there is something there. You don't have to always have the startup that's, going with the latest trends like AI or crypto or whatever. But sometimes like an opportunity was sitting right in front of you the entire time.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. My tip there too was like, I think it is, some people are naturally better. I'm probably not. So what I started doing is I just have a notes app in my phone. I don't use it as much anymore because I'm mostly just focused on this, but for kind of those 2 years after my wound down startup, I just had this notes app, and every single day, if I thought of something weird or some weird problem, I just wrote it down. And this was one of them, right? After one of those conversations with my buddies after it, I was like, I don't know, maybe a company that helps other companies shut down seems really weird, wrote it down. And then I just kept coming back to it for like a couple of weeks. And I was like, all right, I got to test this thing out. So for folks who maybe struggle with trying to think of problems to solve, that's just a good habit. It sounds really simple, but the more you can consciously think about the problems you're seeing and just write them down, as many as you can, you're going to eventually kind of come up with something that might be pretty interesting.
And have a good support network around you too. Other people, founders, people of similar interests that could provide feedback and verify that, or maybe they'll give you a different angle or idea to make it successful. But just, it's good to be out there with other startup founders and to bounce the idea off them and see what they think as well.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Awesome. So where can people learn about Sunset and sign up for services today?
Yeah. So obviously our team's always happy to chat, right? So we're not always a great fit for everyone. We know a lot of folks though. So if you're ever going through a tough time, or you're interested in acqui-hires or need, lawyer recommendation or investment banker, just hit us up. You can just go to sunsethq.com. You can either, book a demo, email us, get a live quote, anything like that. But again, we're really here to help. So just ping me, let me know if you ever have any questions. Always around.
Awesome. Well, Brandon, it's been great having you on today. Brendan, sorry. And we look forward to continuing to partner with you guys. Happy to have Sunset HQ on our B2B SaaS and AI marketplace as well. We do get a lot of startups that come our way. So, I think this is definitely a very valuable service that I think often gets overlooked, but shouldn't, because a lot of startups just don't even know there's a process for shutting down. They just try to close their door one day and hope nothing comes back and bites them later down the road. But get ahead of it. Like Brendan says, 6 to 9 months in advance, check your cash flow, look at your options. It's better to start planning in advance. But these guys are the experts. Feel free to reach out to them, sunsethq.com, or you can find it today in NachoNacho, the B2B SaaS marketplace.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andy. It was awesome chatting.
Likewise, you too.